Hey, witches.
Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Folklore in
Yeah,
Egyptian folklore.
Egypt. Yes, so we're getting into some more
A
of
lot.
um, some of the more well-known, well, let me rephrase that. Some of the more well-known in America, or at least in the
Oh, yeah.
Midwest, gods and goddesses.
Midwest.
Yeah,
Why the Midwest? Why not America?
because that's where I'm from and that's what my experience is, but I don't know what they teach in like California. We don't have a federal like standard for education, so which is just insane, but that could be a whole episode in itself. So today we're going to talk about some more well-known gods and goddesses, starting with Osiris. So Osiris, this is going to be confusing because it was confusing to me when I read it, because in my head Anubis is the god of the dead. That is not actually technically the case.
I always thought it
Osiris,
was Anubis.
yeah, Osiris is the god of the dead. And in the new kingdom, which is also confusing because that's not how I was taught it, but um, it's basically in one of the texts. He is considered the master of the underground world and the next world, or the next world, which is the afterlife. The English translation of his name is Almighty or the Powerful. Um, and he is sometimes referred to as the King of the Living and foremost of the Westerners because of his being the ruler of the dead, who the ancient Egyptians called Westerners or the living ones. Um, so that's kind of confusing, but also interesting. Um, he
So
is
they're called the living ones, the Westerners?
the dead are called Westerners or the living ones, but they're actually dead. The dead are called that. Yeah,
Well, their
interesting.
beliefs for like the afterlife, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So he is the son and the oldest child of, I'm going to say this wrong because I didn't look up a pronunciation for this one, but Geb, the earth deity, and Nut, the sky goddess. His
Oh,
wife and
they do.
yeah, his wife and also sister is Isis. Um, and it was said in the stories that Osiris and Isis were deeply in love with each other, even in the womb, which is interesting. So, um, I didn't realize like how much incest was in Egyptian mythology, but it is. It's
That's
a lot.
probably why there's a lot of incest in Egyptian pharaohs.
Yeah. Well, and also like a lot of the Roman, um, as I'm getting into this, a lot of the Roman like stories, they adopted a lot of the Egyptian stuff. Um, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit because it's like the Romans adopt the Egyptian and Greek stuff, and then the Christians, because the Romans become the Christians eventually, um, base even more of their stuff off of Egyptian, and it's just wild. But basically, they're in love in the womb. Um, which is also interesting because I guess I don't know what their birth order is, but like, were they even in the womb together? Like, were they just little eggs floating around in there and they were just in love as eggs? I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Um, he is typically depicted as a man with green skin and a beard, like the type of beard that's associated with the pharaoh. So, like the long, skinny beard. He usually is wearing a crown with two large ostrich feathers, and his legs are partially wrapped like a mummy. And in his hand, he holds a flail, which is like a whip, um, with multiple string things,
Mhm.
and the symbolic like pharaoh's crook. So there's one main story about Osiris in mythology, and it is about him before he becomes the master of the afterlife. So Osiris ruled Egypt and was like basically the first pharaoh, kind of. And he taught agriculture and he gave the humans laws and civilization. And the humans loved him and like revered him. Well, his brother, Set, was extremely jealous of him. So he killed Osiris, cut his body up into a bunch of pieces, which he then hid around Egypt. And he became the king of Egypt, or the pharaoh, whichever, with their other sister, Nephthys, as his wife. So lots of sister wives happening here. Now, Nephthys and Isis were close. They're sisters. They were close. So when Isis is like heartbroken because, she loved this dude since they were eggs in the womb, she decides she's going to find her husband and bring him back to life so they can have a child together. So she'll have a piece of him with her. Nephthys helps her find all the pieces of her husband's body and reassembling them, and they hold them together with linen wrappings, which is why he's typically depicted with his legs mummified. There's one piece, though, that they can't find. One very important piece. They can't find his penis. It's gone. Don't know where it's at. They never find it. Don't find it. But she brings him back to life anyway, because she is like the goddess of witchcraft or magic and yada, yada, yada. So she breathes life back into him. Some stories say that all of the gods come together, kind of like a High Lord vibe, and bring him back to life. But this one and most of them say that she breathed life back into him. They're together again, and somehow, even though there's no penis, they magically conceive a child who is Horus, but we don't know that yet. And then, because obviously he is like Frankenstein back together, they decide, or he goes to the underworld and becomes the lord of that domain. There's another myth where Nephthys takes on the appearance of Isis magically and like goes to Osiris, and that is the conception story of Anubis. So in this story anyway, Osiris is seduced by his sister, not the one that's his wife, but his other sister, Nephthys, and she becomes pregnant with Anubis. And then the biggest thing associated with Osiris is that the dead kings of Egypt, after they die, they rise and inherit eternal life with Osiris. The new kingdom, which is kind of like the New Testament, where they're like, oh, we don't like that, so we're going to change it a little bit, says that not only are the dead kings able to rise from the dead, but any Egyptian that performed the appropriate rituals could also rise with Osiris. And this belief that Osiris is like associated with new life after death causes him to be associated with the new year and different cycles of nature. Now, if the story of Osiris sounds a little bit familiar, he was dead and then after a little bit he was revived. Many elements of his story are similar to the death and resurrection of Jesus. And where their stories are different is what's said to happen to people after they die. So, but the whole resurrection piece is a little fishy. Anyway, ancient Egyptians believed that the deities Anubis, Amut, Hennefer, Ma'at, Osiris, and Thoth would greet the person in the afterlife and perform the weighing of the heart ceremony. The person's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, and if it was lighter than the feather, they lived a good, truthful life and would spend eternity in the kingdom of Osiris. If it was not, well, that's not good for them. Current like pagan significance or like Kemetic paganism. Osiris is viewed as a deity representing death, rebirth, and the cycle of life. Practitioners can honor him through rituals, meditations, connecting with the natural world, and specifically with like rivers flooding and then going back down, because the big thing about the Nile was that it would flood, and then when it went back down, the land where it had flooded was super fertile, and that's how Egypt was able to be such a like booming society. So rituals and meditations, rituals centered around the themes of death and rebirth, in the afterlife, those are all going to be places you could work with Osiris. Connecting with nature, particularly the cycles of nature, the changing of the seasons, even like gardening, like you could ask for help from Osiris. Offerings for Osiris are going to be like green plants or stones like malachite, as symbols of renewal and fertility, because he's also the god of fertility. I don't know. And then approaching him with respect and recognizing his role, embodying wisdom, justice, and order is going to be important. So some modern pagans also explore the broader themes of Ma'at, which are truth, justice, order, and they're associated with Cyrus in ancient Egypt, and they'll pull those into their own spiritual practices. So that's Osiris. Now we're going to talk about sister wife. Isis is the great mother. She's the goddess of healing and magic. Ancient Egyptians actually called her a Set, which is interesting because their brother's name is Set, but hers was a Set. So I don't know. That's what they called her. Some point along the line, that got changed to Isis, which translates to Queen of the Throne. She is the protector of women and the bringer of magic. And even though in the beginning of everything, she started as like a secondary figure to Osiris, like after thousands of years of like worship and things, she almost becomes more important to him than him in certain, I don't know, circles. And eventually she's called the Queen of the Universe, and she is the embodiment of the cosmic order. So, I don't know. Isis is most often represented as like a gorgeous woman wearing a sheath dress, like the white sheath dress. It either has a hieroglyphic sign of the throne or a solar disc and cow's horns on her head.
Cow words?
Cow's horns.
Oh, I thought you said words. I was like, well, what?
And then every once in a while, in certain stories, she's represented as a scorpion, a bird, or a cow. So, sorry, a car just flew by our house. Like, the speed limit on this road is 25. They were going faster than that. Anyway, myths and stories. I'm not going to repeat the story of her putting her husband back together because we just talked about that one. But there are more stories about Isis. She taught the women of Egypt how to weave, bake, and brew beer while she was still living among them. When Horus was born, because remember, he was born after his uncle had murdered his father, and like, so his uncle is like, I don't want that baby born because that's going to be a rival for me. So she hid with him in the marshes of the Nile Delta until he was fully grown and could avenge his father and claim his throne. So she defended her child against attacks from snakes and scorpions. She did struggle with this because like her whole goal here, and Horus's goal is to grow up and kill Set and take his father's throne back. And so eventually, during the final battle between the two, she takes pity on Set and was beheaded by Horus because she like betrayed him basically. But then the beheading was magically reversed and they were able to reconcile, and Horus takes the throne of Egypt.
Yay!
Yeah, you know, lots of the word just left my head, but like rising from the dead happening here. Resurrection, that's the word I was looking for. There it is.
Yeah, there you go.
Another story, Isis wanted something from the sun god Ra, so she creates a magical serpent out of dust and Ra's spit. Gross. She hides the snake by a like path that is used frequently, and it jumps out and bites and poisons Ra. And even though like Ra is super powerful, he cannot cure himself because the snake is made from his own spit. So because it's like he did it to himself kind of vibe, he can't cure himself. So then Isis shows up all of a sudden and promises to cure him if he will reveal his true name to her, which gives her equal power. In one story, the reason that she does this is because Ra, the sun, is too close to the earth and is burning people up or burning up the crops and like making it difficult for people. So she is tricking him to help the humans. In another version, she poisons him to get the power to basically conceive Horus without the penis involved. So, you know, whatever. One of those reasons. But because Isis became such a like huge figure, out of that grew the cult of Isis. And
Any relation to the extremist group?
And by that you mean like
ISIS?
No. Okay,
thank you.
No.
I'm just curious.
So the cult of Isis is a Greco-Roman group. So there's a quote here from one of the old stories. And it says, there in the beginning was Isis, oldest of the old. She was the goddess from whom all becoming arose. So they adopted her basically and started following her because she was kind of like, she was called the All Mother or the Mother Goddess. Which is funny because she has a mother. Like, she's not the original. Oh, time to take my medicine. Anyway. But they take her on and start worshiping her. She was popular with women because she was the goddess of love and motherhood. She was popular with sailors because she had control of the sea and the weather. And she was popular with men because she was the goddess of warfare. So this, I don't know, this was wild. The cult of Isis was considered a mystery religion, so it was like super secrecy, the daily worship, like you had to, it was a cult. Like you had to do certain things and you had to keep things secret and you couldn't do certain things. So it was something. The cult of Isis would offer redemption for lives poorly lived. So like people who did bad things this might sound familiar. People who did bad things could decide to join the cult of Isis and all of a sudden they would be absolved of their sins. All of a sudden.
Christianity?
No, what? No, the cult of Isis. We're talking about the cult of Isis here.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were talking about Christianity for a second.
Yeah. She is actually one of the ancient deities in this religion, most similar to the Christian God, in that it was monotheistic. She was the only deity in this cult. As the religion progresses, she becomes more entwined with death because of the story of Osiris, and because she is the goddess of healing. So she apparently, according to the cult of Isis, discovered the elixir of life, and any of her worshippers would then have a chance at getting the elixir of life if they were devout enough.
Mm.
And that is a story from the cult of Isis, not from Egyptian history. So let's be clear about that. Isis was popular among the Greeks for many reasons, but part of the reason that her cult spread so far, because it spread over like multiple different countries up into Greece and Italy, what is now Italy, so like Rome, is because she was the goddess for like the sea and safe journeys. So people would pray for her before they left wherever they were, and then again when they ended their journey. And since so much of the Greek economy relied on seafaring, she became really popular there. There's so much more about the cult of Isis. I started to go down a rabbit hole. Honestly, the cult of Isis could be an episode in itself. So I stopped there. But that's the cult of Isis. And then the current pagan significance of Isis. She is very popular in modern day paganism because so much, yeah, because so much of like modern paganism is matriarchal and like women centered, especially Dianic Wiccan groups because they are very female centered. Isis is big in a lot of those circles. She's seen as a figure of protection, magic, healing, motherhood. She's kind of the Egyptian equivalent to Hecate.
Okay.
Yeah, like she's the goddess of magic. She's not the goddess of witchcraft, but magic, witchcraft, like, you know. So in Wicca, she's seen as a powerful goddess. She is incorporated kind of as the mother figure. In Kemetic Wicca, which is focused on the Egyptian pantheon, she's worshipped alongside Osiris and Horus. She is revered as a nurturing mother protector. So a lot of people who want protection for their children might work with Isis. And she's also known for her healing and magical abilities, being able to cure the sick or even bring the deceased back to life. So if you're doing like ancestor work, Isis might be someone good. If you're sick and you need help in that way, Isis would be good. There is some influence from Isis onto Christian beliefs, partially due to the cult of Isis. It's controversial, but some scholars suggest that the worship of Isis, specifically Isis and the story of her and Horus, come to the story of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. So a lot of ancient depictions, like statues and other artwork of Isis, show her holding baby Horus and nursing him, much like the more modern depictions of the Virgin Mary holding the baby Jesus. So people compare the story of Isis and Horus to the Virgin Mary, especially also because there's that, you know, her husband didn't have a penis, so he was like an immaculate conception kind of vibe. It's just lots of parallels there between the story of Isis and the Virgin Mary. But that's Isis and Osiris. Lots of fun stuff. That one was really fun to research because there was so much to talk about and like lots of weird shit that I didn't know. And I thought that I knew a lot about Egyptian mythology, so learning a lot about them that I didn't already know was interesting.
So he didn't have a penis.
He didn't. I mean, he did originally, but then his brother cut it off and hid it somewhere, and she couldn't find it.
Damn. That sucks. That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, now we're going to talk about 3 other ones.
Yeah.
The drama of Set, Horus, and Nephthys. So, I did read up on how to pronounce one of your gods.
Yes.
So it's soft G, so G, and then in most. Okay, hold on. Let me read it. Okay. It says the English pronunciation of the Egyptian god Geb is most commonly Gebeb, so like a double B, with a soft G sound, or occasionally Keb. Older sources might also refer to him as Seb, but Geb is the more widely used and accepted pronunciation today. Like when you look at ancient Egyptian, or from what we understand, it's GBB. So that's why it's pronounced Gebeb.
Okay.
And there's a lot of debate on whether or not it's true Egyptian, if it's mixed with Greek, or if it's actually more like Somalian, based on like locations and time. So
yeah, and I think that's what happened with Isis' name as well, because like I said, originally the ancient Egyptians called her Aset. And I think that when it got mixed in with Greek and Roman, it got changed to Isis.
yeah, and that's the problem with a lot of like these ancient cultures. A lot of things are going to get ruined across time. Not only that, but like when you start mixing in Westerners, white people that don't like differences,
they be fucking up everything.
Yeah. So, but anyways, so I'm going to talk about Set, Horus, and Nephthys. So long ago, the sky goddess Newt and the earth god Geb birthed a pantheon, as we already know. Partially. So a lot of these destinies are going to reshape the cosmos. I just pulled my pants off my burn.
Oh.
That was sore. And one of them was Set. So Set, Isis, and Osiris are essentially siblings. So Set was often depicted as a red-haired, enigmatic beast whose essence gripped chaos, storms, and the unforgiving desert. Now listen, for anyone who's a fan of Legend of Zelda, let me tell you, this shit screams Ganondorf if I ever did see it. Because that bitch grew up in the desert, that bitch got red hair, and he turns into a giant fucking beast at some point in the game. So, if you ever played that game and you just can't imagine what Set might look like, just think of Ganondorf or Ganon, and you'll be fine. Anyways, so he gripped chaos, storms, and the unforgiving desert. In contrast, Horus, graced with the noble wings of a falcon, that's kind of his head as well, came to symbolize the regal kinship and order. So kind of like the opposite. Now keep that in mind, the opposites. Alongside these dynamic figures stood Nephthys, the quietly powerful goddess of mourning and protection, whose role in temple rituals and funerary rites were integral to the Egyptian conception of the afterlife. So Nephthys was born of Nut and Geb, like her siblings. She's also portrayed differently in some myths, but she had a union with Set. This union with Set was very tumultuous, and it kind of shows like the legend behind it, or the myth kind of whispers that there's a little bit of issues with Set. So he had a volatile nature, and that means her affections, because of this, because of his nature, her affections turned towards Osiris, which then gave birth to Anubis.
Yeah.
Hello. And again, Anubis is the jackal-headed deity who would oversee mummification, which is probably why everyone thinks he's like the god of death.
Yeah.
Makes sense. But it also makes sense that he's like basically the leader of that, considering his mother was the key integral role for funerary rites. God, Jesus Christ. Listen, I had a root beer earlier, and it is just so bubbly. It's causing me to hiccup. So yeah, just imagine that. You got Nephthys, who is married or with Set, and then all of a sudden she's like, I like Osiris. And then she goes and has Osiris as her lover, and then boom, Anubis comes out. So we're already in for a show. So here's a little bit of like there's an ancient struggle, order versus chaos, and this is kind of seen across all kinds of pantheons. So like we could see that, we saw that in essentially in Christianity's got it. Christianity's got it with Jesus and the devil, or God and the devil. There's chaos, and then there's order. There's that with with Ragnarok and Norse mythology. That's chaos versus order. All of these things. So again, in this pantheon, it's pretty. There's a similar story with it. And so he is his evolution within the Egyptian pantheon is just as traumatic as it is tragic. So he was originally a guardian of the solar god Ra. But Set's dark legacy was kind of, cemented when he infamously murdered his own brother Osiris. So from this act of betrayal emerged Horus, born to Isis and Osiris, who would dedicate his life to restoring balance and exacting justice. So because of this one deed that Set completed, that's kind of where Horus came from. And that's also kind of where the Isis can't find the penis kind of thing comes in. So because of this, Horus is now dedicating his life to restoring the balance and exacting the justice that, brought him forth. So this ensued a struggle between these two. So it wasn't just physical might, but it was also the allegory for the eternal contest between order and chaos. So it was it's a layered conflict, okay? And it is layered. We got some family drama all up in there. So obviously that's always a struggle. So as these guys clashed, timeless legends have emerged from this. So there's actually a popular myth, and it recounts a fateful boat race that decreed by the gods to determine who would rule Egypt. Now, Egypt essentially had pharaohs, and pharaohs were essentially chosen mortals by the gods to rule Egypt, or so they say. So this boat race, so this challenge was kind of weird. It had both contenders were instructed to race in boats crafted entirely from stone. Horus, foreseeing the inherent flaw, stone would simply sink. He constructed a boat of wood disguised to appear as though it were made of stone. Set followed the literal instructions. He was a little autistic. He built his vessel from actual stone, only to witness its immediate submersion. So this strategy underscores the value of adaptability against uncompromising literalism. So if somebody says, go jump off of a bridge,
That's gonna
there's a
do
little
it.
bit there's a little bit behind that, but like do it with a bunch of cord. Like don't be just fucking literal about it. So Set fucked up and he sunk his boat. And he got pissed. So this became more elaborate. So in another myth, both Set and Horus transformed into mighty hippopotamuses. And hippopotami, right? Is that hippopotami?
I don't know. I think so.
It's cacti. So like, why wouldn't it be hippopotami?
Yeah.
Anyways, so they became hippos. And hippos are not necessarily well known in Egypt, but like obviously there's crocodiles in Egypt along the Nile, all of that. So there's hippos there too. They actually clashed in this myth. They clashed beneath the rolling waters of the Nile for 3 relentless months. Damn. So concerned for his son, Isis intervened by hurling a harpoon into the fray. Tragically, her aim faltered and struck Horus instead. Bum, bum, bum. In the moment of unbridled fury over what he saw as her hesitation, Horus retaliated with such force that he severed Isis's head. A calamity only reversed through the intervention of Thoth, the god of wisdom. We'll get to them in a later time. In another account, and it's like I don't have a lot of information about who these guys were, just literal myths about like their place in the world, essentially. So another account is what people pin it as the lettuce incident. So Set attempted to undermine Horus by orchestrating this ploy. He tricked his rival into consuming his own bodily fluids, believing that this disgrace would leave Horus weakened. Yet, Horus managed to turn the scheme on its head, like he did the other one with the boat race. He forced Set to fall victim to his own plot. So when the gods finally convened to settle the matter of rightful rulership, Horus's exposure of Set's deceit played quite the pivotal role in securing his ascension. Eventually, this conflict culminated in a celestial tribunal. Here, the gods themselves had deliberated over the fate of Egypt. Set argued that brute strength and cunning alone were worthy of rulership, while Horus championed the cause of justice and the sacred right of inheritance. So it's kind of like, for those who are like fans of like Greek or like Roman, I don't know the equivalent of Roman, but like in Greek, it would be more like Mars, not Mars. Fuck. Ares. Ares, and I would say something along the it's not Athena, but it's like she's not well known. I don't know. There's a goddess that like I don't know. I can picture her. I literally am fucking picturing her.
I'm so
like
confused.
I want to call her a Libra, but she's not a fucking Libra. But she's got like the law things. I don't know. Anyways, it's probably Athena, and I'm just like fucking it up. I don't know. Look that up real quick.
Okay.
Anyways, where was I? So the assembly that gathered for this, argument, their decision came only after a lengthy debate. Basically, the balance of wisdom had ultimately prevailed in favor of Horus. Horus said. Maybe that's why Set was always so angry, because nothing went his way.
Themis?
Who?
Themis?
No, she's like one of the main gods.
What is she holding? What'd you say she's holding?
I feel like she's literally holding like a scale of some sort. Like goddess with scales, Greek.
Every time I look that up, it says Themis. Themis.
What's another fucking name for that? Artemis?
No, I don't know.
No, Athena is literally Ares' brother. What the fuck? I don't know.
She's the goddess of wisdom. Artemis is what?
What's
the
justice? Goddess of justice.
Themis.
I don't know. Maybe that is her. I don't know. Maybe I'm like thinking it's her, but I'm like thinking it's Artemis instead. Not Artemis. Athena. Ugh. Anyways. Okay.
I don't know.
Whatever. I'm trying to figure out where I was. Great. Nice. I got so wrapped up into that damn idea. I can't remember where I was. Okay, anyway. Horus won the debate between everybody based on his wisdom that he had. So that's essentially who won. The assembly chose Horus. So yet on the other side of that, because Horus won that inheritance or whatever thing, Set was banished to the deserts. His role was not entirely like forgotten or like thrown to the side. He didn't get his way. So myth recounts that he would later serve as an essential part as Ra's defender during a nightly battle against the chaos serpent of Apophis, which symbolizes that even destructive forces can be an integral part to like a renewal process of some sort. So like every day is a new thing kind of thing, and he's important with all of that. So that's kind of like the deal between Set and Horus. Did I even say what Horus looked like? Oh, yeah, like a red-haired enigmatic beast.
Yeah.
For some reason I want to picture Horus like a snake with a snake head. It makes sense. Anyways. So during the whole narratives of this divine conflict between Horus and Set, Nephthys emerges as like that quiet figure that's kind of like getting strength in the background. She is renowned for her protective nature. She was also often depicted with outstretched arms that sheltered the sacred rituals surrounding death. While not only that, but she also courageously guarded Isis and the souls of the departed. So she's very important with that dearly departed thing. In one myth, Set's unrestrained wrath was so profound that in an attempt to demean her power, he tore off Nephthys's wings, which is obviously one of her major symbols. And this was this removal of her wings was a temporary fall from divine favor, or like the symbol of her fall from divine favor, which is crazy because isn't that what happened in a different religion we know of?
Mm-hmm.
Where someone loses his wings and he falls from divine intervention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Crazy. Not intervention, favor. So even though that happened, her essential role in the funerary rites and all of that had persisted. So she had remained the guardian of the dead, ensuring that the cycle of life and death maintained its sacred balance in terms of mummification and making sure like crossing over and all of that, they were protected. So although these legends were conceived in a world long, long ago, ancient times, their influence still is kind of around today. So Horus has a piercing gaze and like a regal bearing, obviously because he won that divine conflict. for justice and inheritance. So he's going to be seen as like that icon of leadership. He's frequently invoked in modern art and popular culture for that leadership role. Set, once a figure solely of terror and chaos, is now actually reinterpreted as a necessary agent of transformation. Obviously, not that he was a bad dude, he just chose to do bad things, and now he's like got an important role in something, so it's kind of like that. Okay, can't think of that word. Just gonna move on from that. Anyways, transformation. That's what he is. It shows that transformation is possible. So basically it's just a reminder that destruction often clears that way for your renewal. So if for some reason shit's not going your way, yo, listen, this is a therapy session. Think of Set, man. When you're down on your luck, you don't think things going your way, just think of Set. That shit became a main guardian at start of every new day for Ra, the sun. Don't worry about it. I got you. I just saved you $150. And Nephthys, with her quiet resilience, still continues to stand as that beacon of protection in mourning. So it's like a she's that person that you should go to for that mourning to like protect you during that time or whatever. In protection of those loved ones who passed. So these mythic narratives still spark that imagination among like filmmakers, novelists, and cryptid enthusiasts. Hint, hint. So proving that there is still quite consistently a dance between order and chaos that is as relevant in today modern time as it was in ancient Egypt. So the legends of Set, Horus, and Nephthys can kind of help us question our values and explore like the vulnerabilities that we face every day. And it can also help us celebrate the delicate balance that defines both, the cosmos, the human spirit, and modern everything time. So that's really all I could find was a lot of myths.
Yeah.
But if you want to know more, you can always go to Wikipedia, World History Encyclopedia, or Mythopedia. You can find those there. I just think stories are a lot more better, so we could see a little bit more about the person.
Yeah, I agree. I like the actual stories.
Yeah, so that's all we got today for folklore. So until next time.
Bye.